Welcome to the programme. We begin this hour in Iraq, where an attack on a girls' school has killed 5 students in western Baghdad.
Yes, for more on this and other news coming out of Iraq this Sunday, let's go to Al Jazeera's Hoda Abdul Hamid in Baghdad. Hoda, tell us what happened.
Well, from what we understand, Kamal, the school came out, 2 mortars landed in the courtyard of the school. It was at a time where all the students, mostly female students, were in the courtyard. 5 students died and 20 others were wounded. Now, that school is in the Al-Adil neighborhood. Al-Adil neighborhood is one of the predominantly Sunni districts of Baghdad. It comes under constant mortar attack. One security source tells us that there was about 50 mortars have landed there over the past 3 days.
Hoda, as you illustrate there, these type of attacks happen so often in Baghdad, but 5 schoolgirls in their school, would the indignation over something like this perhaps raise tensions even further?
Well, the 5 schoolgirls died today because these mortars are really lobbed randomly at that neighborhood, and they land wherever they land. Now, these 5 students died today. 70 university students died last week, and it's just a constant, everyday attacks on anyone here. And if you speak to Iraqis, they really tell you everyone is target every day. It's just it's going to be, each of one will have his turn. It's just a matter of time. So it doesn't really raise more indignation than the indignation that already exists.
Indeed. Okay, let's move on, Hoda. An ambush of a member of Iraq's industry ministry. Can you tell us about that one?
Well, that happened this morning very early. He's an official of the Ministry of Industry and Mines, and he was traveling with his 28-year-old daughter, who also works at the same ministry. They were on their way to work. Gunmen ambushed their car, ambushed their convoy, stopped the convoy, and killed the official, his daughter, and a bodyguard.
Hoda, just finally, the Ashura Festival, the Shiite festival, I believe is starting this weekend. What's security like? Being stepped up, I would presume?
Well, security is becoming really, really tight, whether here in Baghdad or on the way from Baghdad to Karbala, which is where really the Ashura festivities are celebrated. It's about 70 kilometers south of Baghdad. The entire road, from what we understand, is under heavy security with checkpoint after checkpoint. From what we understand, also we spoke to residents inside of Karbala. The entire city has been cordoned off with only checkpoints that will very few checkpoints that allow the tens of thousands of pilgrims going there in and out of the city. There's a lot of tension. Ashura, 2 years ago in 2004, while the pilgrims were celebrating Ashura in Karbala, there were several car bombs. 170 people died then, so lots of tension now. This morning there was also news from Najaf, which is nearby Karbala, saying that the authorities there had thwarted an attack. Apparently Sunni armed groups were hiding among the orchids in Najaf, and they were planning to attack Shia clergymen tomorrow, the day of Ashura in Najaf. So lots of tension really around the Ashura, and you can see that all the time on television. Really, people, the government calling and putting numbers out, calling on people to call in as soon as they see someone who is suspicious, or they think that a car could be a car attack, a car bomb, or there's any kind of suspicion they can find. Lots of tensions here, Kamal.
Hoda Abdul Hamid with all the latest from Baghdad. Thank you very much.
To Iran now, where there are conflicting statements coming out of the country as to just how far its nuclear program has progressed. An Iranian nuclear agency official denies claims that it's begun installing 3,000 centrifuges at a uranium enrichment plant.
But with 3 nuclear inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, already in the country, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert has said he won't allow the world to, quote, avoid confrontation with those who call for Israel's destruction, a reference, of course, to the Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Now, all these statements come as Russia's national security chief arrives in Tehran for talks about Iran's nuclear plans.
In a moment, we'll be looking at why the centrifuges are important to advancing Iran's nuclear program. But first, Nadeem Baba has this.
As the debate over Iran's nuclear program intensifies, there are mixed messages from Tehran. A senior lawmaker claimed on Saturday 3,000 centrifuges were being installed at the underground Natanz facility. Hours later, the move was flatly denied by the head of Iran's atomic energy organization. Whatever the reality, Tehran says 3 UN inspectors are in the country, checking this uranium conversion plant in Isfahan and a reactor in Iraq. It's also defending its banning of 38 inspectors from countries which voted for mild sanctions.
This decision is lawful and will not harm our cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Many experts say Tehran is bluffing. It's failed to produce a few grams of highly enriched uranium, let alone the 50 kilograms needed for a couple of bombs. The IAEA boss, Mohammed Al-Baradei, says Iran's at least 5 years away from a nuclear weapon. He's called any idea of a military strike against Iran's nuclear facilities bonkers. That's a view probably shared by Russia. The head of its National Security Council is in Iran trying to defuse the situation. But some analysts are saying for the US and Israel, the latest announcements may be a step too far. Nadeem Barber, Al Jazeera.
Well, the exact details of Iran's nuclear program are a well-kept secret. After more than 3 years of investigation, the IAEA can still only guess what it's capable of. Now, a UN Security Council resolution based on IAEA findings imposed sanctions on Iran for failing to stop enriching uranium, but Tehran insists it has a right to nuclear power. So what's involved in this enrichment process? Well, before it reaches the centrifuges, uranium ore must first be purified and converted into what's known as yellow cake. Now, this radioactive substance is then chemically treated to become a gas. But for uranium to work in a nuclear reactor, it needs to be enriched. Now, that's achieved by spinning the gas in a series of centrifuges. The result is low-grade uranium, which can be then used to power nuclear plants. This is what Iran says it's aiming for. But some in the international community fear Iran is trying to produce highly enriched uranium for nuclear weapons.
An announcement to resume talks on North Korea's nuclear program appears imminent. Japan's Foreign Minister Taro Aso says he's expected news on resumption of the Six-Nation talks to be made on Monday. North Korea quit the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty early in 2003, and it conducted its first ever nuclear test in October last year, raising concerns about possible nuclear proliferation. The Six-Nation talks are expected to resume in early February. Clashes between the rival Fatah and Hamas Palestinian factions have continued in Gaza for a third day. Gunshots were heard across Gaza City. Residents were confined to their homes and shops have been closed. Earlier, there was an explosion outside the house of a bodyguard to a key Fatah leader, Mohammed Dahlan. No one was injured in the attack, but there was significant damage to the house. In the 3 days since the latest violence flared, at least 25 people have been killed, including a 2-year-old boy. A further 50 people have been wounded and up to 50 kidnapped. Talks between representatives of Fatah and Hamas to end the fighting in Gaza collapsed on Saturday night, dashing hopes of progress towards any substantive talks on forming a Palestinian national unity government.
But as you might imagine, the Palestinian people are divided over who's to blame for this unrest that's left over 20 people dead just this week.
Both the president and the prime minister are to blame. I blame both of them. They're both in charge. If they're not up to it, then why take the job in the first place? God rest his soul, Yasser Arafat single-handedly protected the whole of Gaza. Enough. These people should just stop.
This is Hamas's fault. Though Fatah is plagued by corruption like Hamas, Fatah's bullets were never directed at the people. After these months in power, Hamas is shooting at the people.
I hold Fatah responsible. Hamas came to power through the people's will. But it has been under pressure by the international community that has choked it with cutting funds. This is why the security situation went out of hand. It is an elite bunch fighting over power, and meanwhile it all reflects on the people. We work until no end. We can barely make ends meet, while they don't care about us.
Pakistani police have launched investigations into Saturday's suicide bombing in Peshawar, in which 15 people died and more than 30 were injured.
Now, no group has yet claimed responsibility for the attack in a busy city marketplace and close to a mosque. Pakistan's Chief Minister Akram Durrani has appealed for public patience and religious discipline.